We've received 2 apologies, one from Councillor Hugh Jones from Wrexham and one from Alan Price, NRW.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for that. So, are there any declarations of interest on any of the items today?
Sorry, have you had an apology from Derek Butler? Or is he here? I can't see him.
No, we haven't as of yet. No. Do you want to apologise for him?
Can you put in an apology just in case? He was just trying to call me. He was probably in the previous meeting I was at and seeing who was going to come here. So
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item number 2 then is minutes of the joint committee meeting held on the 11th of September 2020. Good 6 months ago now, isn't it? Okay, I'll go through first of all for accuracy. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Okay, that's I'll go through again then for matters arising. Slow down a bit for this one. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And page 7. Okay, Howard.
I'll move those.
On page 7, we've got the sustainable tourism strategy to be reviewed. So I've put that as one of our key elements into Welsh Government's Sustainable Landscape, Sustainable Places bid for 2021-22. But I'm awaiting the results of that. It's supposed to be a capital bid, and we'll see whether they consider that's a capital item or whether they consider it's a revenue item, but I think it's important it's raised. And some of the other background to that is that Kerry Lloyd from our team in SDF has been working with Trina Noon to start reviewing where we have tourist accommodation, tourist attractions across Denbighshire. And Trina tells me that she'll be able to do that with Flintshire and Wrexham as well. So that's positive news on our intelligence to what we actually have got in terms of tourism and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Okay. Okay. We need those to be approved. Yeah. Yeah. Would somebody like to, a member of the committee, like to propose those minutes, please?
I will.
Caroline Thomas, please, and a seconder.
David Kelly.
David Kelly, please. Thank you. Thank you both. Okay. I'll sign those in due course then. So next item, we've got to note the draft minutes of the AOMB partnership held on the 19th of February. Andy, would you like to make any comment on them, please?
Yeah, just a couple of short comments, really. The minutes are there, so it's all self-explanatory, I guess. But just to draw attention to, the problems that occurred with the snowfalls and the massive numbers that have visited the various honeypot sites within the AOMB, and the fact that we're going to be working with the Welsh Government to get a bid in to perhaps aid the dispersal of visitors around the AOMB. The highways design issue, and people were obviously concerned about some of the visual intrusion of the colours of the salt bins, amongst other things, and double yellow lines to manage the numbers of people at parking and so on. And so we set up a task and finish group to look at how we could perhaps ease that, whether we go down the route of looking at clearways or whether we keep the double yellow lines, because one or two people thought that they at least are adhered to much more strongly. But that's the task and finish group's job to look at that. I'm sure David will be able to tell you more about dark skies, but some important issues there about funding has been obtained, and working with Denbighshire County Council for lighting replacement at loggerheads, which will serve as some sort of a pilot for other AONBs. A number of updates, which I think will be on today's agenda, so I won't go into those. Staff will be talking those up. But I do want to pay tribute to the staff. You know, COVID has been a massive, massive problem for everybody, I guess. But I think in many respects, if you look at the work of the AONB, I think the staff have managed to keep it pretty well on track and keep it moving forward in the most unusual circumstances. And again, that's a real tribute to the staff, and I'd just like to put that on record. And I think that's about it, Chair.
Thank you for that, Andy. Do any of the officers want to comment? David, do you want to say anything?
Sorry, just trying to find the mute button there. Sorry. Just to pick up on what Andy said about dark skies, it's in the report. We are hoping to take the supplementary planning guidance to Denbighshire's Planning Committee next month, and then if that's approved, we'll be clear to go to public consultation on the document.
Okay, thank you. Caroline, you've got your hand up? Did you want to?
Yes, thanks. Does the dark sky project need to go to the other planning committees as well? You know, Flintshire and Wrexham, do we need to raise the profile again regarding it? And also regarding the amount of tourism and day trippers to the AONB. I remember that just pre-COVID in February, trying to go to Morvan, and the amount of cars parked both sides, I had to reverse back down to the road because I couldn't turn around anywhere. So that was February pre-COVID, and I just think that the amount of day trips and tourists, once everything opens up, is just going to be enormous. We've had problems at Wepper Park even last week. We had to open the car parks up, and we're having to extend the car park as well. So I am really concerned, you know, for us. I just don't go there now at the moment, anywhere. No, because Forest even, I avoid them. But I do worry, you know, about it.
Yes, it's definitely a concern. Howard, did you want to go?
Thank you, Tony. The first one is that obviously we're now reviewing our membership of the partnership. We've written out to all members asking them whether they are happy to continue or not. And we're also very keen on looking for new people all the time, really, especially if they give us, you know, more diversity and more gender equality as well. It is important in our thinking as well. So that's the first one. Secondly, Sustainable Development Fund. Welsh Government have rolled that out again this year. So again, we've got £100,000 for the Sustainable Development Fund for 2021-22. The National Association of AONBs has continued to work with the AONBs of Wales. We've got our own Welsh officer, and we again are working with him, and we're working across the protected landscape of Wales. That includes the national parks, and we're looking at some joint bids as well there, as well as our individual bids to Welsh Government. And on a very, very short turnaround, David and his colleagues were really good at getting a bid for green recovery money. So we got extra money at several of our sites, including Loggerheads, Wenfrwd in Llangollen, which is the old tip site, Morvindig, and also Fronhain up in Eryris. So we had 225,000 for that, which has to be spent by June. So, I mean, there seems to be a lot of money floating about at the moment. And thanks to David and other members of the team, we've sort of taken advantage of every time it's opened up in Welsh Government world. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
So, Tony, would you like me to come back on Carolyn's questions?
Yes, please, yeah.
So with regard to the SPG for lighting, my understanding is that it's been approved in Flintshire and Wrexham for public consultation already. So we've just got to sort of take it through the Denbighshire system next month, and then we'll be able to go out for public consultation across the 3 authorities, and we'll get it all sort of moving at the same pace then. And in terms of, sort of, I think we all share your concerns about the number of visitors potentially coming to Molvalmai and Loggerheads and Coed-Nedicus and all of our key sites. And I am going to do a bit of an update on that later on in the meeting. So.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I was made aware as well of a website based in Liverpool that were putting together great days out within 40 minutes or within an hour of Liverpool. So I emailed them and said, please don't advertise these places because we have enough to cope with. So I think we need to look across the border as well. Sorry, you said you're going to talk about it later, it's just, as I remembered. We need to look out for these and communicate across the board in Liverpool, rural Cheshire as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so those minutes are duly noted. I am the Denbighshire representative on the Welsh Government's Rural Affairs Forum, which consists of the 9 most rural authorities in Wales. Unfortunately, it doesn't include Flintshire and Wrexham, but they do have partnership from the parks, and I've asked that AUMB have their input on the next meeting, which will be in June after the elections. So I might get that officer to give a report to that Welsh Government on that. Work on that one, Howard. Okay. Item number 4 then on the agenda is the Joint Committee Finances update. This is a standing report, and I think we've got Steve Gard has joined us. So can I hand over to you, Steve, for your report, please?
Yes, Barda Pawb. I've switched my video off just because I'm struggling with Zoom at the moment on my connection, so it's just safer. Yeah, this report is the normal report you get every meeting. It's not the annual report, which will come at for your next meeting, which includes all the annual returns and the formal signing, etc. So this is just an update on the budget monitoring, really. And it's all good news. There's a vacancy saving, which has meant that actually we're going to draw down less from the reserves, which is obviously welcome, and that obviously gives us a bit more resilience going forward. So there isn't that much more to add, really. I don't want to string it out and talk about stuff that isn't particularly of interest. Obviously, Paula, my colleague, is online as well. So if you have any queries about the particular lines of the budget, I'm sure Paula will be able to update you. And then obviously I can answer any questions around sort of the strategy or the budget setting or that side of things. So as I say, it's good news. Really pleased. Again, it's the OMB budget has been managed really, really well since it's been set up. And that's thanks to my officers and the officers within the team, and they work well together. So I'm really pleased to present this report. Really, I'll pass over to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll take some questions on that. Councillor David Kelly, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, what I was going to ask was around the current situation with COVID grants, because certain authorities and schools and wherever were eligible for COVID grants to comply with such things as the requirement for PPE, social distancing, signage and the like. In view of Carolyn's statement about the capacity of car parks, if you get a car park that's literally full to capacity, swamped out, first thing is social distancing tends to go by the board, and people by default start gathering in groups because they meet people that they know. And I was just wondering if we've had any success in applying for any of these COVID grants, because there is significant cost to do the risk assessments and try and stay compliant it's no good just relying on the police to turn up and say, oh, we need to shut this now on safety grounds. There's too many vehicles, there's too many people. Because as we start unlocking, as you know, the maximum number in a group initially will be 30, won't it? Now, if you can open a football stadium for 20,000 people that they're talking about the cup final, it's easy because there's a formula based on the stadium size and the seating capacity and whatever. But when you're in somewhere like the car park at Mulvamai, who's to say when you say enough is enough? Once the people are dispersed on the mountain and on the footpaths, it's not so much of an issue. But it's the pinch points that are the car parks that are the issue.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Howard, do you want to answer?
Yes, David, that's a really good point. I think over the lockdown period, funds have been made available, and I know that we, via Paula, have been looking at those funds and using those funds. But there's also a recognition under destination management that the authorities' frontline services will all be under pressure. And I've just noticed an email from our head of communications asking, she's putting a paper together at the moment, asking for the pressures rolling forward. There's things like, you know, rill and litter, and obviously the pressure we're under at Loggerheads, Mulvamai, just the basic elements that people are exploring more and getting to our lesser known sites. The sort of, you know, the amount of usage, it must be tenfold increase across all our sites as people have been restricted to walking from home. So yes, and you know, key to that is our countryside ranger team, and obviously at key moments in the year, holidays, weekends, you know, the visitor pressure increases, you know, tenfold really. So, you know, I think, and I'm hoping that we're going to get extra resources to look at this in the next financial year, and potentially permanently really, because it is a revenue pressure on our sites, that we have staff on the ground, and really we need that human face to interact not only with visitors, because obviously we have a number of distressed residents as well in that time period who want to get in and out of their houses. So, you know, they look to us to sort it as well, because obviously the police are sort of the last resort really, and we don't want to, if we can, we would like to avoid the sort of the law enforcement side and get people to move around and be reasonable about visiting places. So going forward, we don't know what that might mean. I mean, I know that, you know, obviously, you know, we've got all sorts of lighting arrays that can flash up, you know, 20 miles from your destination to divert you to somewhere else. But basically, we'll be looking at all options really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come back on that, David?
Yeah, it was only the point really that the during the COVID lockdowns, and even when some of our well, I call them skip sites, but that's not the correct terminology, because of the increased usage of some of the refuse sites, the police were actually insisting on some of them being shut on road safety grounds because of the amount of traffic that was queuing. Now, we've seen some of the issues with queuing traffic in relation to the things that have been left open. My concern is that, you know, as we start to unlock during the unlocking of the lockdowns, is that we, as Carolyn says, we will see these car parks, these pinch points re-emerge. And I think the police inevitably have to take action. You know, if the traffic is backing up onto a main highway and there's potential to cause accidents from wherever. So the particular concern is that we have to have some sort of generic risk assessment where the signage would go up, effectively just saying car park closed, car parks full to capacity, to make people aware that they don't turn off on a major road and try and drive down into loggerheads and there is nowhere to park and that type of thing really. In relation to the funding, I'm hopeful that we would see some projected speculative grant funding included in our outturn figures for the next couple of years, because I think we're all aware that people won't be travelling abroad, they'll be staying in this country, and that will be putting increased pressure on all our attractions in the local area. You can see it's already happened, and it's going to get more noticeable. That's all, Chair.
Thank you for that. Steve Gadd, you got your hand up, please.
Yeah, just quickly on the grants, just there has been announcement that on the budget, I'm sure you saw, for continued COVID funding for the first 6 months of next year. That does include this sort of stuff. The way they're not specific grants that you apply for, there's a monthly expenditure return that each local authority will do, and that's how we claim this expenditure, and everything sort of goes through those expenditure claims. Now they have specifically added an element to that for opening up the economy and tourism. So, you know, there is funding there for the new year. Now, there is obviously then the question of the ongoing funding, and obviously each authority would have to consider those pressures as part of their budget process. But yes, you know, I think everyone recognises that that might be a pressure going forward, that will need further resources, but I can't prejudge any decisions, obviously.
Okay. Thanks for that. Yeah, I know in Denbighshire we have ramped up about Molvamai and the car parks and that, and we have regular meetings on it with the county councillors, and every weekend I get a notification of, you know, what numbers to ring and that, who's on duty. So it is a problem. We do recognise it, and we will be doing something about it. Howard, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just Bobby's put some feedback in the comments on the side, and David and me have already talked about this potential where you end up, you know, somewhere gets filled and people move on, in terms of Bobby's talking about Llangollen and Corwyn. So, you know, I think that's what we will see. Carolyn makes a very good point. Unless you actually intercept the people, you know, 30 miles away back in Liverpool by getting to the websites, or they work with us, a cross-border type regime, really, you know, when they arrive, they're going to go somewhere. And, you know, that is the issue, really. If you cannot get there, in the end, you give up and you go somewhere else. And it's whether that second place can really cope with it. So, you know, if you think about the major cities, they've got lots of, you know, advice: this car park's full, move to the next car park, or, you know, Llangollen, stay on the A5, you know, go to Corwyn or do that. I think that's as much as you can do, but we're quite away from that sort of traffic management. I know that, and Bobby flagged up Llangollen, even on a busy day, people don't know which car parks have capacity and which car parks are full. So I'm guessing really this is really not necessarily an AONB problem. This is a county-wide problem, or North East Wales problem, where we need to be working with our highways departments as well as the police, you know, in looking at advanced ways of sort of getting to these people, talking to these people, or when they get here, as the last resort, moving them to places where they can park and moving them to places where they can stop. So if you've driven 50 miles, you're not going to just turn around and just go straight home after that journey. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, well, thank you for that report, Steve. Next, item number 5 is...
Chair, do we accept them or move them, or is that okay? Do we formally, Gary?
Sorry, I'll thank you, Karen. Sorry, I was being very careful then to unmute myself, because I seem to spend a large portion of every meeting being told to unmute myself, and Steve's laughing because he knows. Yes, I mean, there's no decision being asked for. It's just for you to note the latest outturn. So quite happy, Chair, if you want to, just by the assent of the meeting, just confirm that you're happy to accept the outcome.
Yeah, happy to accept. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that, Karen. Gary. Okay, so that's accepted. Number 5 then is field update. Who's doing that? Howard? The went through Pocket Park and Molvamai project. Is that David? David, would you like to come? David Shearer would like to come in again, please?
Yeah, so I was going to give an update on the Wenfrey Pocket Park, but also some of the green recovery work that is linked to what we've just been talking about. So I'll try and do that first, if that's okay, just sort of to pick up on some of the work that we're doing to prepare for this coming season. So I'm just going to try and share my screen if I'm able to. Is that visible to everybody?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to sort of briefly go through the last lockdown, the second lockdown, if you like, and what we did and what we're doing to prepare for the coming season. So I think, you know, as Councillor Kelly was saying, that even though the lockdown was, you know, people were able to exercise locally, because loggerheads and mulvammi, you know, we know attract people from further away, and it doesn't take long for the car parks to fill up. A decision was made to close the parks, to close loggerheads, mulvammi and Llantysilio Green. And that was a joint decision with ourselves, local members, lead members and the police. And actually the police requested that the parks were closed, just to sort of stop those pinch points that David Kelly was talking about. So we closed over the Christmas period and sort of went back to, you know, some of the signage and stuff that we'd had during the first lockdown. So just to pick up on the point that was made, that we did have advanced signage on the A494 as you came, you know, along the main road, to say that the car parks were closed and that access was only for residents. And eventually, you know, that was compounded by, you know, our worst nightmare, which is snow over the sort of Christmas bank holidays, which traditionally bring thousands and thousands of people to enjoy the snow. And it was really difficult because everybody was on holiday and everybody wanted to go sledging. So so again, the police and the sort of working with NRW and Denbighshire, we took the decision not just to close the parks, but to close the road. And we closed the road up to Mulvammi to sort of try and make it easier to manage the amount of traffic that wanted to come. And we were very, very busy, particularly over the New Year weekend and that Christmas period. The police actually, because there were concerns about the traditional sort of gathering of people on New Year's Eve at the top of Mulvammi, the police, you know, staffed this roadblock, you know, until the early hours of January the 1st to make sure that people stayed away. And we worked with the police and with NRW on a rota to you know, we found that this roadblock only really worked as long as it was staffed. People just drove around the signs unless it was staffed. So we took it in turns on a rota with the police and NRW to keep staff there. It was very, you know, put a huge strain on our resources. You know, we had to double up sort of ranger staff to make sure that we could, you know, cope with that pressure. We also worked really closely with Denbighshire's comms team, North Wales Police's comms team and NRW to make sure that these messages were getting out. And we had some good press around you know, the fact that the beauty spots were closed and, you know, sort of naming and shaming some of the people that were still coming. And the police issued, you know, quite a number of fines for people, you know, travelling into the area. So I think, you know, from our perspective, although it was, you know, quite a intense period, I think that we managed to work really well together with all services, the police, NRW and ourselves, coordinated our efforts. And sort of by the beginning of January, the message had got out and sort of the effectiveness of the parks being closed and the way we had it staffed and sort of sharing emergency numbers and everything worked really well. So that was, you know, while all that was happening, we were sort of also making preparations for what we could do once the season restarted. You know, we saw last summer, you know, just how busy it got at Mulvammi, at Loggerheads, at Coed Nerquis, at all of our sites. So as Howard mentioned, we've secured some funding through Welsh Government through fundings made available to national parks and AONBs, and we've spent some of it to commission a report on parking and traffic flow at Molfamau. We engaged a company called Mott MacDonald, and they had a look at the 3 car parks at Molfamau, the one that's owned by NRW at Coed Molfamau, and then Penbarras and Bentley, to look at what we might do, not just to, not only just to increase capacity, but to improve traffic flow in general. The key recommendation that they made was to introduce parking restrictions, the obvious one. So we've seen, on the road down from, between the car parks, roadside parking causing, huge congestion when it gets busy. So they're recommending that we introduce a parking restriction on this part of the road, which is basically all the way from the top of the hill, where the car parks are at the top, all the way down to almost to Tabernagelin. So that whole road needs a parking restriction. So there's still some debate about whether or not there should be double yellow lines or whether it should be a clear way. There's advantages. The advantages of yellow lines is that people clearly understand what they mean, and there is a reticence to park on them. I think people feel that they're more likely to get booked. A clear way that you don't have any double yellow lines, you have to have quite signs repeated quite often to say no parking on the verges, and I think there's a feeling that actually people more likely to take their chances in that sort of restriction. So at the moment we're leaning towards double yellow lines on both sides of the road, but obviously there are ways of doing that in protected landscapes, using sort of canary yellow and a thinner line sort of to reduce the impact on the landscape. There is also the second slide at the bottom there. There is also a proposal to provide some on-street parking on the roadside, because the gates are locked at night, and because people like to turn up quite early in the morning to go running or what have you, that some parking beyond the car parks is needed. So there's a proposal to create 15 spaces on the side of the road, and we'll take that into account when looking at the parking restrictions. So at the moment we're in the process of working through that parking restriction order, working with Denbighshire Highways, and we've commissioned some more work to design this lay-by, if you like, on the side of the road just outside the car park. And that work is ongoing, and then we'll need to find some money to implement that. But I think it's critical that we sort out the parking at Molfamau as soon as possible in advance of the summer that's coming. The other thing that we've managed to do with Howard said, we have secured some funding to help us increase capacity. So there's work going on as we speak up at Molfamau to reshape and reprofile the car parks that are already there, to make sure that we're getting the best out of the spaces, that to make more efficient use of the space. So creating just a few spaces here and a few spaces there. So in all, we think that we can create a combination of the 3 car parks, about 50 or 60 additional spaces in the car parks. And we've got contractors there at the moment trying to get it done before Easter. The other critical thing that we're doing as well at some cost is to replace the pay and display machines. One of the issues that we found, particularly last summer, is that the old machines that we have are cash-only machines, and people don't carry cash anymore, and they don't like handling cash, and particularly over COVID. Now, it's always been an issue for us because of you need an internet signal and everything to do contactless payments. But we have found a company that do 4G sort of linked pay and display machines, and we've trialed them in all areas up there, and amazingly, much to all of our surprise, we get reasonably good 4G signal. So what these machines do is they search for the best 4G, and they use whatever's giving the strongest signal at the time, sort of roaming SIM cards on them. So so we're replacing the car park machines so that we can, so nobody's got any excuse. A lot of people were not parking in the car parks because they didn't have the right change or what have you. So they're parking on the roadside, or that's what they said anyway. Maybe they just didn't want to pay. But this this sort of removes that sort of barrier to people using the pay and entry machines. So that work is going on at the moment as well. We've got 2 machines already up there installed and working. Outside of that's what that work at Molvamai is going on. Outside of Molvamai, and we're also conscious that it wasn't just loggerheads and Molvamai that was sort of seeing an increase in visitors, and you know, particularly as people were trying to stay local, a number of other sites are starting to struggle with the increased pressure of increased visitors. So we've drawn down, as Howard said, some Welsh Government's green recovery money that was offered to us in February. We accepted it mid-February, and we've got to spend it really sort of before June. So you know, we're sort of moving at pace really to try and get this work done. But to be honest, we need to do it before you know, we go back to normal in terms of opening the sites to visitors normally. So we're doing some work at the moment. We've just completed some work on the Leap Path to improve the surface on sections of the Leap Path. We are doing some work at Graig Fawr with the National Trust to improve the car park above Melodin, which again, you know, has become busier as people are sort of using their local countryside. And we're also doing some work to improve the pathways and the gateways and things at Molvindeg, which again has seen an increase in people over the last 12 months. And we'd hope to do some work at Clwyd as well to deal with some of the parking issues there, and we're talking to NRW about that. And then the other thing that we're doing, you know, more widely is to look at investing in our community miles program. We've got a series of local walks from villages, you know, across Denbighshire and the AOMB, and we've found, you know, over the last 12 months that people are increasingly walking their local networks because they want to stay away from the busy honeypots, and we would encourage that. We want to encourage people to enjoy their local networks. So again, with green recovery money, you know, we're looking to Hannah Arndt, who's the sort of access recreation officer, is investing in new community miles walks at Llanbedr and at Prestatyn and a number of other places, and we're trying to get those up and running before the season as well. In terms of other things that we're doing to prepare, you know, sadly, you know, last summer we also saw you know, a marked increase in the number of people injured, and actually we had 2 fatalities as well in the sort of Clwydian range. So we're talking to the emergency services, and we've recently installed a defibrillator on the Overstite path just below the Jubilee Tower, where we did have a fatality last year. So because it's not just the car parks, you know, we found last year it's not just the car parks that get busy. You know, we've seen an increase in, you know, the requirements for maintenance, and you know, more people means more litter, more emergencies, more dogs with stock issues and all that kind of thing. So you know, all of this is sort of preparatory stuff. As Howard said, we're also putting a plea in for, and putting bids in to try and boost our ranger team. You know, it's clear that, you know, last summer we had to double up the numbers that we had on duty at weekends, and we had to do that over Christmas, and it's clear that we'll certainly need to do that over the coming period as well. At the moment, we really struggle to have any staff on duty at all at weekends in the Dee Valley, which really leaves us vulnerable, I think, to dealing with some of these issues. So we're trying to, at the moment, to boost our weekend ranger teams to help us cope. And then sort of again, more widely, over the last 12 months, we've been looking at our behavioral messaging and making sure that, you know, we're getting our messages out around all those things that, you know, more people bring. They bring more litter, they bring more issues with dogs. We had issues last summer with campfires and barbecues. And, you know, of course, you know, the reminders around social distancing. So we produced a suite of signage, and Kerry Lloyd has sort of produced, is working in the moment on a comms plan to sort of help us to get some of these messages out, not just within Denbighshire and the Wrexham and Flintshire, but I know that Denbighshire comms team are targeting some of the social media that they're using to communities on the Wirral and Merseyside by sort of paying sort of for targeted adverts on social media. So, and then just on, I don't know whether this is going to work, but I'll give it a go. We've also last year, in anticipation of this, produced other tools for social media and produced some animations. I don't know whether this will work. Oh, let's see. Oh yes, maybe it will. So. So I don't know if that worked. It worked for me. Hopefully it worked for you. But these are the kind of social media tools that we'll be using over the season. There's a number of them for parking sensibly, litter, dogs and stock, planning your visit, which is a key message that we'll be putting out. Plan before you come. Anticipate that it might be busy. Think about going somewhere else. So there's a number of social media tools that we've been putting together to try and help us to manage that. Has anybody got any questions on that in terms of what we're doing to prepare for the season?
Can I ask a question, David? The NRW car park on the road way up to Mulvamai, has any progress been made with that barrier on entry? They're going to do something about it, to take it to the exit instead of the entry, because that was causing a bit of a problem.
You're right, that was a real sticking point. The barrier sort of creates queues, and again, it's a cash only barrier. So NRW are going through the procurement process at the moment to replace that. I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not sure where they're up to, but it's on the cards for them to replace it. So it's in the process.
Could you chase that up, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for David? Andy, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I can't find my little yellow hand on here somewhere. I got my thumbs up rather. So if you see a thumbs up in the future, Chair, I want to ask a question. Just one relatively short, I think. And the first one is that the emergency provisions that you're making, the 2 deaths that took place, I presume they were from natural causes and not for something dangerous or a dangerous activity that was going on. Was it?
Heart attacks basically. Yeah. We had an accident, a cyclist at Loggerheads who had a serious head injury, and then the others were what you'd call natural causes. Yeah. Okay, then the way you're dealing with it seems to be appropriate. That's fine for that one. The second one is, and it's more like a strategic one. We spent a lot of time this morning, and quite rightly, talking about the pressures that we're getting from the problems of people turning up at all our sites, and it's quite right. We've got to deal with that. We're dealing with that in the context of our own resources, the land that we hold, and so on. But one of the main objectives of the OMB is actually to promote the place for tourism, for business development, for recreation and access. And it seems that we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we stop that, and it does ask questions about how we go forward. Does this require a really massive injection of resources to acquire more pieces of land that we can convert into car parks and so on, so that we can continue with what is a key objective for us, and that's attracting people into the area, as opposed to spending a lot of time and effort trying to stop that or to move them off somewhere else. You've got an issue now which we've not talked about yet in Llangollen with the closure or potential closure ultimately of the railway, which will reduce access, I suppose, in terms of people wanting to visit the area. And what do we do about something like that? Do we support the ways in which we can keep that going and so on, or are we quite happy to let that go because it's going to reduce the pressure on our tourism sites? So I think that's something more almost of a statement about how we look at how we move forward, given the situation we're in at the moment.
I think we're, in many respects, you'd say it was a victim of our success in attracting people into the area, but COVID's had an impact more recently, of course. That's fine for me then, Chair.
Yeah.
Want me to come back on that now, Chair?
Yes, please, David.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good point, Andy. And I think the work that we did with the New Economics Foundation a couple of years ago, I think, we were very keen to set out the visitor pressure that we were under before COVID came along. We were very keen to set out that visitor pressure in the context of the benefits that people coming to the countryside really bring for, across the board in terms of the local economy, in terms of health and well-being. And I think we demonstrated that really well with that report. And actually, that report helped us to draw down some of this money through green recovery and through SLSP to invest in our sites. And you're absolutely right. I think it's about building capacity in our sites, but also asking people, to perhaps visit differently. So one of the things that I forgot to mention in terms of that more long-term planning that we would like to do, and we're sort of looking to sort of secure funding for, possibly through SDF, would be to do a recreation plan for the central part of the Clwydian range. So that would be looking at Loggerheads, Mulvamai and its relationship with Coed because we know that there's a lot of transfer of visitors from those three sites, but also looking at Mulvindeg and Bryniau and possibly Aberdun Nature Reserve in that little cluster of sites. So how do we move people around that area? What are the rights of way like between those sites? What are the car parks like? Are we promoting it properly? Do we need a leaflet for that central part of the Clwydian range? So that we can start to look at that geographical area and manage visitors more positively rather than, just bracing ourselves for everybody turning up on the same day at the same place, which, I think we need to move away from. So I think hopefully we are trying to address it in a positive way.
Okay.
Thank you. David Kelly, you had a question, please?
Yeah, it was just in relation, Andy's made a very good point actually about the potential to, I wondered, in Snowdonia National Park, because of the pressures they've endured with the verges and the highway, where they've actually introduced a considerable number of, they were initially temporary car parks related to park and ride schemes. And I think some of those now are going to become more of a permanent feature. So the potential to just speak to farmers and say, well, actually, you've got quite a flat field there, reasonably well drained. During peak times, could we just open it up? You could charge or we could charge. You'd have to man the gate or whatever. But the potential for doing things like that. And of course, the other major issue that we've got, because we've seen it all over, we see it at Llandegla quite a lot with the mountain bike centre, because they charge say £4 or £5 to park up there, but the trails are free, but people don't want to pay £4 or £5. So the default situation is they go and park on the verges, up Cascandittu up to Tavernagarth, and of course people who just want to go for a couple of hours and have might go for a coffee at one of the visitor centres. They are not inclined to pay £4 or £5, but they may pay £1 or £2. So it's a difficult one to judge, to know where to set your parking charges. What customer base are you accommodating? The £4 or £5 who will park all day and go walking all day, or the ones that just come for an hour or two and they won't pay that kind of money. So are we looking at differentiation between long stay, short stay?
That's a really good point. I forgot to mention that when I was talking about the new pay and display machines that we're installing. And one of the advantages of those is that they are linked directly to a server, and we will be able to gather quite a lot of intelligence around how people are, using them. So we can start to vary our tariffs to help us to manage that turnover of visitors and try and manage pressure and visitor stay in that way. So we'll be able to interrogate what people are doing and sort of fine tune tariffs, because that's a really good way of managing particularly peak periods. So hopefully that we'll be able to be a bit smarter at that in the future.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, Howard?
I was just going to say that really it's our duty, as an AONB to protect the landscape. So, this is very much a balancing act, and, we have got still tranquil areas within the AONB that we want to keep tranquil. We don't really promote per se, we don't promote the AONB as an entity to come and visit. If you get here, it's often, for specific reasons, as David's just said, the Llandegla Mountain Bike Centre is your destination that happens to be in the AONB. So I think it's a question of balances and checks. When people get here, then we are the issue is there, and it is a natural destination, always has been, and the new sort of things like Llandegla Mountain Bike Centre just create more of that. But I think there's still those quiet places quite close to Llandegla Minera Mountain. It's still a nice quiet place. The natural narrow road across to World's End restricts people, and hopefully that's a natural barrier. So I think we're just within something where we just need to continually monitor things, and David's used that word that's becoming a favourite word of mine, intelligence. The work that Kerry and Trina Noon have done on intelligence mapping the tourism accommodation and the tourism attractions should actually have an effect on when we look at planning applications. If we've got 15 attractions in an area, do we want 16, 17, 18? That cumulative effect of what businesses and private enterprise do might detract from their income as well as the area. So I think David's right, it's intelligence we need more than anything. So we're just not making these decisions with a finger in the air. The sort of being able to interrogate the pay and display machines is a really good step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Bobby Feely, you've got a question, please.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, well, Andy actually virtually took the words out of my mouth, because when David's presentation was going up, and he had one which was block capitals COVIDiots, and he billed it as good press. To me, I think it is making us seem extremely unfriendly, and it's not just here, it's throughout North Wales. So I really do think that we have to think really hard about how we do this. We wouldn't be having these discussions if it wasn't for the pandemic. And let's be honest, the pandemic hasn't spread through outside activity. The pandemic has spread mainly within four walls of people's houses and so on. So the fact that people are going out, exercising, enjoying our countryside, we've got to remember that's fantastic. Last year, me and my husband, we went back somewhere that we'd been on virtually a first date, and I don't like to tell you how many years ago that was, down in Dorset, and that was Studland Bay and Lulworth Cove and Durdle Door. And it was just park on the side of the road years ago, many years ago, and you just wandered freely. And now it is a tourist attraction, but they haven't put signs up stopping people and yellow lines. They have just increased the capacity, done it beautifully on how people do access this area. And, I'm not saying I didn't prefer it all those years ago, but they have embraced it rather than kicked it out with horrible signs. So, I think we do really have to think long and hard about the visitors coming here and wanting to enjoy the glorious countryside. As somebody else said earlier on, it's not just the hotspots. There's lots of it everywhere. I mean, I found so many spaces. I've been here 40 years, more than, and I have found so many places that I have never been to before, and some of them only within 5 miles of where I live. So I think there are lots of places to go outside of the hotspots, but I really feel uncomfortable about making people feel unwelcome, especially people with families and elderly people wanting to exercise and so on, and wanting to enjoy our lovely countryside. That's my rant. I've finished now, Tony.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we all appreciate there is a fine balance, and the team are doing the best, aren't they? But the traffic management on Malvamai does need something sorted out for the sake of the tourists and residents. Howard, your last point on this one?
I was just going to say, Bobby, I think we'd all want to welcome people coming to the AONB. You know, we want them to have a nice time when they get here. I mean, I think all the work we're doing is trying to sort that out so that we're intelligent to be able to stop them having a frustrating time trying to park. If we've got to capacity, trying to move them around. So I think we'd all say that. And I think these sort of people, you know, nailing kissing gates together in Llangollen so people can't get over, spraying out signs. You know, I've seen it in Llangollen as well. Yeah, none of us like that, you know, apart from those individuals who actually carry that out. Thank you.
David, did you want to? David Shield, did you want to? Okay, I've got a couple more. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just come just to sort of support what Bobby has said. I think, and what Howard has just said. I think we were under particular pressure over Christmas, but we are taking a very positive approach to reopening our sites, both in terms of what we're saying now on social media, and the investment in those sites. I think you're right. There's a difficult balance between there's anxiety with some of the communities that live close to these areas, but we want to welcome people back. That's what we're here for, and that's our sort of core purpose. So the social media that we're putting out at the moment, is very much about, we are preparing to welcome you back. We are investing in the pathways and the car parks, and we're looking forward to welcoming you back. And actually, what's been really nice is some of the exchanges that we've had on social media just reinforces how precious people view access to loggerheads and wildlife. They are, they're really looking forward to coming back. They've missed coming to our site so much, and that's really important for us to recognise. So just to reassure you that we are taking, a positive approach to preparing and welcoming people back to our sites.
Okay, thank you, David. Mike Skuse, you wanted to?
Yes, I just want to agree with Howard when he said that when push comes to shove, protection of the countryside comes rather in advance of tourism, promoting tourism. That's all. So I think we need to be very careful before we start suggesting further car parks and making even the honeypot car parks bigger. Yeah, the first thing in protected areas is well-established thing that protection of the countryside comes before tourism or before recreation. That's all.
Okay, thank you for that, Sorry. Councillor Derek Butler, did you have a point, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Relevant to the last point, a lot of the funding comes from tourism and recreation budgets as well, so we do have to have a balanced view on this. I'm with Dave Shield because there are opportunities here, but it's about the behaviour managing of new new visitors, really. We've all seen in our own communities of people have got out walking, even locally. The litter problem has proliferated, and it's about educating new people to our AONB, bringing urbanised practices with them, I think. So the messaging really does need to be more forthright and reinforced. And I think perhaps the budget for that messaging needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. I think we'll make this the last question, and Caroline, I'm sure you can sum this up very nicely.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't intending to sum up, but is there a way of having updates on our websites as to where there are issues with traffic management? I know when we reopened our household recycling centres, we had live updates saying huge queues at Mould, go to Buckley, so if people are visiting the area, they just know where else to go to, even, or to promote other areas. For example, I told that website, why don't you promote Greenfield Valley, Heritage Valley, because we've got lots of free car parks and loads of spaces, rather than Wepper, which we always struggle with. I don't know, people sometimes go to Facebook, don't they? But if they're coming outside the area, it's just how can we promote and just move them around so that when they do arrive, and if the roads are congested and there's no car parks available, that they just don't add further to the congestion, that they know where else to go. I know when I lived in Mold, I didn't know where to go to for a walk. It was always Loggerheads or Mulvamai. Now I live in, you know, in a village. It's, you know, it's great. I know I can just go up the fields and things. So it's just really promoting other areas as well.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for that. As regards the Mulvamai, as I mentioned, we have a monthly meeting now with the 3 county councillors on the area, and we are sort of making some strong progress on that. But final point on this one, Howard, and then we're going to move on.
Just to say that, you know, if you do look at the website over the weekend, Kerry is often, and the information staff are often updating when car parks are full. So in a small way, that intelligence is already there. But I think we've seen this leap of intelligence for you know, with Zoom and all the other mediums we've got at the moment. We need a leap of intelligence to those people to do exactly what you said, to move them around before they get to the destination and cause a problem to themselves and also, you know, give congestion. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we've given that one a very good airing. So the next one is the SMS and visitor pressure in COVID. Is that Rachel? Rachel, please.
Hi, Chair. Yes, I'll just try and share my screen now. I think I'm just going to give an update on the SMS project as David's covered the COVID section. So hopefully you can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't been aware of the project, the Landscape Solutions for North Wales or North East Wales is now in its 3rd year. It's a sustainable management scheme funded project, and its main aim is to bring just over 40 sites in the project area into more sustainable management. It's 10 partners across North East Wales. We've got Flintshire Countryside Service, Wild Ground, Wildlife Trust, Conway Countryside Service have 1 site in, that's our furthest western site, and Denbighshire Countryside and the A1B and a couple of smaller community charities. Let's go through. Obviously, COVID had made a few things difficult last year, but we've got 2 project staff who are based with the A1B, Jack Parry and Gwenor Jones, and they've done a really good job of trying to continue the project as best as they could with within COVID restrictions. So during last summer, there was a number of contractor work was able to continue. So one of the issues with the site, the way to bring them into sustainable management is by introducing conservation grazing. So a lot of these sites have high ecological value, but they were unable to have grazing either due to lack of stock fencing, water supply, or they hadn't had scrub control over recent years. So the first thing over the first 2 years has to be trying to get these sites ready for conservation grazing. So this summer we've continued with a programme of capital work. So there's a lot of capital budget with this project. So you can see a number of the sites across the area, and these were some of the bigger projects. Capital works on Wynallen to improve the access and to improve the fencing. Mulvamai is it's a little site named by the local school children called House for a Grouse. So it's between the common area, the Office Site National Trail, and the forest. And it's a really important area for breeding black grouse. So we've fenced off about 32 acres up there, and we're going to be hoping to put cattle on there this summer, because we have a massive problem with regen of conifer there. So they like to nibble away at the very young conifer regen coming up. So that's one of our main sites up there. And Wolfindeg's a local nature reserve, and we have a bit of an issue with bracken on there, but we've got Cynhaliwyd ponies grazing the site. So a lot of this work is either to introduce the grazing or to support the grazing already going on. So this is Conway Mountain, the most westerly site that we help in the project, and this is bracken control. This is the work at Harddwch Grouse. So one of the issues we have at Harddwch Grouse was the access to get the cattle on and off. So through the forestry block, we've improved the access track, and then this is the main pen area that will be. So there's a bit of at first when everything's gone in new, but it'll gradually fade and it'll blend in once it's all settled down. This is YMDDIHEURIADAU, some of the access work. So some of the old styles were replaced with kissing gates, and the fencing renewed to support hopefully some more Cynhaliwyd ponies moving across to that site this summer. Prestatyn Wetlands is a site Denbighshire purchased, and it's quite an urban site. It's got a housing estate really close by, but it's got some fantastic wildlife over there, and the aim was to get the cattle on, so it's all been fenced off, working with the NRAW project, which is with Denbighshire Countryside Service, and working with the grazing officers. They've had these belted Galloways on, so a lot of these sites really need the traditional livestock breeds. So the smaller, slower growing, but they're much more able to thrive on the habitats that they'll be grazing. So they're not going on improved pasture. They can manage to graze on the rougher grazing. So these were really popular over there. We had, I think it was 6 to 8 cattle on there for a few months, and they've done a really good job, and so good that they're looking to extend the area of grazing now. And there's been a couple of ponds go in, and they're really hoping, they've put up, the Denbighshire Countryside team have put a viewing platform up, and they're hoping that the cattle will help open it up and draw in breeding birds into the area. It was really difficult last year with all the COVID regulations to manage a lot of the project. Although there's a large amount of money for capital, a lot of the trying to bring community engagement in. So we were hoping to be doing wherever these sites are, to involve the local community and have things like livestock check-in. So people who are walking their dogs or live nearby and walk the sites daily can help check these animals, and we'd be offering training for that, delivered by Pont Cymru, who are conservation grazing specialists. And then we were hoping to do to get communities involved by doing wildlife surveys and monitoring throughout the year, but that was obviously all really difficult last year. But there was a small slot with during COVID regulations, we were allowed to mix in groups of 6, and we just did outdoor training for staff of various partners. So we had some training on livestock check training for some of the partners, and meadow management, which was over in Clwyd, and using some of the newer technology that's coming in now with the Rytec machines to train the staff up on them. And this winter there's been quite a large amount of work gone on the north, just outside the AWMB, on some of the natterjack toad ponds, but it's really this last year we've really seen a difference in how valuable the grazing has been. The rangers for the north are really positive about the effect the ponies have had on Gronant dunes grazing the natterjack toad ponds. And then further east, the cattle grazing some of the sites over there. So that's really good feedback from them. But we've also been working in Clwyd Bell and Loggerheads, and up on Penacloddiau and Cyd-bwyllgor, doing a lot of scrub clearance over this winter, ready for getting the cattle and ponies and sheep on. So this is Clwyd Bell, which we're really struggling with the amount of bracken and gorse up on there. So there was an awful lot of bracken litter. So what I haven't got a photo of, but if anyone is nearby and wants to take a walk up this site now, there must have been a lot of bluebells lying dormant underneath the bracken litter, and they've already started coming up. So we're hoping that there'll be a good show there this year, and then we're looking for more of the heathland communities to come in rather than just being dominated completely by gorse and bracken. And we've got a local grazier willing to put his sheep on there. And Bettersfield in Flintshire was another site that they've had to do some community engagement events last year. And it was a large old tip site, and it was used for dog walking. So they've left a large section open still for the community to be able to access for dog walking, but they're hoping to create hay meadows either side to increase habitat for pollinators. And then loggerheads, we introduced Soay sheep from a local grazier. So these are another traditional livestock breed, and they're brilliant at grazing bracken and bramble. And even when we were up there watching them, there'd be grass available, but they would readily chew on the bramble, which is great for us. So they were up there for a number of months, and we're hoping that they'll be back again next year, but hopefully not when all the snow is there, because that was quite hard work. And these are some of the ponds that they've helped create through the project for the natterjack toad. So we're really hoping to see some positive results with their population increasing going forward. And then Cyd-bwyllgor down near Codwen was really dominated by gorse, and it's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see the cuts that have gone on in here, and the team have been burning the gorse to remove it off site, and then we're hoping that the sheep will gradually move in and help manage this area for us. And so the public engagement, obviously with COVID, it was really difficult to try and find ways to engage with the public when you can't meet them face to face. So we worked on with an artist. What we're trying to do through some of the community engagement events is a lot of the people who have the livestock we use on our sites are smallholders or own small flocks or herds of these animals, and we're hoping to try and increase the economic viability of grazing these sites. And one of these, you can look at wool, honey, wildflower seed, and meat. And we've really noticed last year and the year before, the price of wool really dropped. It was more expensive to shear your animals than the price you had for your wool returned. So we were looking at trying to increase ways for people to use wool, and we were going to be doing some wool wet felting, which isn't very easy to say, for some communities and school groups, but obviously we weren't allowed to go into the schools. So Gwenol worked with one of the local artists, and they've produced a film, so then we can go into the schools and the plan was to go into the schools and do the wet felting with them, and then we produced the film. So what we've done is have the artist there, and she's talked through how to do the wet felting, so the children or any of the community groups we work with can watch and do it as they go along with the artist. And then we've provided the kit. So we've purchased the kit for so many people, and we'll be able to give this complete kit with everything you need apart from the water. And then they can go and use the wet felting. So we were hoping to roll that out to the schools, but then obviously the schools shut after Christmas. So we've been talking to some local schools around these sites, and we're hoping to send these packs out after Easter. And then they can have a go at it, and then we're hoping before the summer holidays, if they're allowed out, they'll be able to come out and visit some of the sites and see some of the work that we've been doing. Gwenol's also been attending some webinars to talk about the project to some of the mind groups and some of the interested groups that want to get it, but we were hoping to have involved in the project. So that's over Teams. It's been the only way we've been able to engage with some of these groups, but hopefully later in the summer it means that these groups will be able to come out to sites in small numbers and get involved with some of the volunteering and the practical work and some of the habitat surveys and the wildlife surveys we have planned. Social media has also been important for us to be able to try and reach these groups without being able to see them face to face. So Gwenol's been working on, you see these are our conservation ponies that Denbighshire Countryside Service and the AWB own. So at the moment they're on Morvindig and we move them around. So Gwenol's been updating where the ponies are, and they've all got names so people get to know them. And it's just a way to draw people in and hopefully get them interested in the project. And we were able to hold a couple of engagement events last year. So we're looking at up in the north on Prestatyn Hillside, introducing grazing. So we managed to do just a couple of events before the fire break, and then over at Bettersfield as well, we managed to get a couple of events in there before the fire break came in. And this is just some of the brand work that's doing. So hopefully when we can go to events, we'll have our, they've worked on a bit of design for the pop-up banners, and these are going to be going on interpretation panels on some of the sites, so that visitors can see why the grazing is being introduced and the benefits to the vegetation and the pollinators that we're hoping it will bring. And then we're also working on a film just about conservation grazing, the site management that goes on across the areas and the benefits that conservation grazing can hopefully bring to your sites. Because obviously some people, you know, if it's a site that they're used to walking on for years, they can be quite nervous of cattle, or you can have dog and sheep issues. So quite often, one of the first animals we bring on are the ponies. They're really quiet, small mountain ponies who will naturally move away from you if you walk up towards them. So these are a really good introductory animal onto grazing. And then obviously we work on messages around dog walking and introducing sheep onto site. And the belted Galloways are really quiet cows. They're almost similar to the Cenedau ponies. They will move away from people rather than some of the larger breeds who can be a bit scary towards some people who are nervous of cattle. So we're quite careful what breeds of or what animals we introduce to sites, and it's about working with partners to identify those sites and bring on the correct animals or the correct breed at the correct time of year. And we're hoping across the landscape that we'll be able to move these animals like we do our Cenedau ponies. So the ponies in the last 12 months have had a better social life than me. They've been on the dunes in the north, and they've been on a site in Ruthin on a hay meadow. They've been at Aberdona at Wildlife Trust site, and then now they're on Morvindig. So we're also working with a consultant to look at that next step to help with increasing the economic benefits of grazing these sites. So we'll be working with them to help see pathways for us for the graziers to maybe have a higher price for their meat if they're selling to auction, because these animals have been grazed on and used to help benefit wildlife on our sites. So that's one of the next steps this year that we're really hoping to work towards. And then obviously the plan this year is to try and get the communities involved with these sites, like because that's we couldn't do last year. So hopefully this summer we're coming up with a plan to get back out and to work on wildlife surveys. And I think that's me finished, Chair.
Okay, anybody, any questions? Rachel?
Oh, sorry, no, that's me just trying to stop share. There you go.
Carolyn, your hand is up, please.
So just a really good presentation and understand about the management of the site. I've been chatting with Helen actually about, I'm a little bit concerned about the ponies on One Little Inn because it's really busy at the moment. Car park is packed. I've seen them on Morvindig, and I do know they move away, don't they?
Yeah. From
dogs and people. So
yeah.
Helen has said that if there's any issues, they can be moved again, can't they?
Yes. So we'll be working. One of the benefits of having the project officers are, before we move the animals to a new site, is they can spend some time on the site in the build up to it. So either putting signs out and talking to the locals so they know what's coming, and they know how to act around the animals or how the animals will react with them. And that's what we did at Morvindig before they went up, because there was a few local people were quite nervous about introducing animals on there. So they will spend time doing that before there's any movement of animals. And they won't be there to stay on Llyn. I think those ponies are on Cymai at the moment. So it'll be the Cymai ponies. So we're hoping to have this relationship between sites. So for Cymai, it'd be better if they weren't there in the summer, so that the orchids and the wildflowers can have time to seed. So we'd be looking for somewhere for the ponies to go during that time, and that's a time which is quite good to graze heathland. And then the ponies could go back to the grassland over the autumn and the winter. So that's how we're trying to marry up a lot of these sites so that they can support grazing, so they're not on one site all year round.
That's a really good explanation, which I'll use that to put to residents as well, the local newsletters. Thank you.
Okay, so next questions from David Kelly.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. It's nice to see some of the traditional mountain breeds returning to the moors and the heaths, because I think a lot of people are unaware. I mean, I was talking to a farmer quite recently from Llandegla who grazes red poll cattle. They tend to finish ready for fattening after 2 years. And those cattle benefit from being on the moor and on the scrub, because if they're actually on lush pasture, they fatten too quickly, and they don't want that. It's the wrong type of pasture for them. And you mentioned the red, the belted Galloways and the Dexters and the traditional smallholder breeds, which historically were grazed on some of the mountain land we see in the area. So, and we did see the other thing the other day about, I think it was on Countryfile, where they're actually using cattle to graze woodland now as well, to get in amongst the trees. I mean, my grandfather always kept pigs in the woods. It was traditional that the pigs would graze in the woods, like you get pigs grazing in orchards, So it's nice to see some of this move away from traditional lush pasture, utilising the other ground, the rough ground. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thanks for that, very much for that presentation, Rachel. The next presentation, our picturesque landscape, I'm afraid we're going to have to postpone till our next meeting. And our relatively new moorland officer, Graham Berry, he can't be with us, but could I ask David Shield to give us a quick summary of the moorland, please?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Graham sends his apologies. He's actually out with North Wales Fire Rescue Service at the moment doing some burning training, so which you kind of have to take the opportunity when the weather's good to do that. So he sends his apologies. I'm gonna, he did prepare a presentation for this morning, so I'll just take members through that, if that's okay. If I've managed to share my screen okay, if everybody can see that. Yeah, just very quickly then, we did appoint Graham Berry into the role of moorland field officer in November. Some of you may already have come across Graham. He was a sort of field officer with the North Wales Wildlife Trust, reserves manager for the North Wales Wildlife Trust before he came to us. So he's, we're very lucky to have him and his experience in upland management in the team. So his post came out, just to remind you, as part as Denbighshire County Council's response and NRW's response to the fire on Llansillia Mountain, to try and deal with the increasing issue of fuel load and wildfire risk. It's a 3-year project, and as you can see, it's jointly funded by Denbighshire County Council and Natural Resources Wales for those 3 years. We've established a joint project board with Denbighshire officers, NRW officers, North Wales Fire and Rescue Service, North Wales Police and farming community to steer the project. And I think that's a really positive first step to getting all the relevant people on board. And it's already sort of proving to be quite effective, particularly in our sort of an improved relationship with the Fire and Rescue Service. So, again, as you can see there, the key aims are to reduce wildfire risk, through promoting appropriate moorland management and reducing fuel load, and making sure that any moorland management that takes place appropriately. It also has a role in helping in the restoration of Llansillion Mountain after the fire, and I'll just take you through a little bit about that in a minute. And part of some of what we've just been talking about in terms of pressure on some sites, Graham will have a role in helping us to promote positive messages about risks of wildfires, barbecues and campfires and things like that. So to date, what he's doing is like I say, he's established a close working relationship with a North Wales Fire and Rescue Service and their arson reduction team. And North Wales Fire and Rescue Service have recently established a wildfire unit, which is based in Corwen, and they have specialist firefighting equipment now, which they didn't have at the time of the Llansillion fire. And I think they saw some of the equipment that we brought to that incident and have replicated it. So that's already a very positive outcome. And we're working closely with them in how that equipment is deployed. So, as I said, AONB staff are attending a controlled burning and wildfire training day today, this morning, up on Molvamai. And we've got a joint sort of comms plan with NRW and North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. So it's really important that we sort of coordinate our messages around to landowners who might want to do burning, but also to the public as well. So said that partnership is already proving very positive. What Graham is doing sort of at the moment, and amongst everything else, is he's carrying out basically wildfire risk assessments using the sort of Upland Management Group standard risk assessment. So that's really looking at where the moorlands of Denbighshire and the AONB are at most risk in terms of the maturity of the heather, or whether there's settlements or car parks, honeypot sites, and where we think that there might be the most risk of an extreme wildfire event. And that means that we can target our management. So he's using GIS mapping to look at where we should be targeting our activity. Otherwise, it's just too huge a job to look at all of the moorland across the AONB and Denbighshire without trying to prioritise and target our activity. So he's already managed to get some work done. This is just north of the Horseshoe Pass at Tyne-y-Wedddion, the Ponderosa. He's working with the graziers there to get some fire breaks cut into the moorland, where there's sort of big sort of banks of mature gorse and heather, very difficult to farm. It sort of makes it difficult to move sheep around. So the graziers have been really keen to work with Graham to not only to get some structure into the moorland here to make it better agriculturally, but obviously these breaks will help if there's ever an instance of wildfire, and it'll make any wildfire that might happen in the future less intense. So that further work again behind the Ponderosa, and the idea of working around the Ponderosa, obviously there's a high concentration of visitors, the vegetation in some places is very mature, and any fire that would take place there could be quite intense. But it's also really close to the Rhaglen and Monera Mountain, which is one of the most important moorlands ecologically in Wales. It's got the Wales's highest density of population of black grouse, red grouse, golden plover, curlew. It's a hugely important moorland, the Rhaglen Mountains. So there's always a high level of concern that something might happen that would cause a wildfire to go through that area. So anything that we can do around the Ponderosa to reduce the risk of that is really good. So Graham's managed to do that already this winter, working with the graziers there. And he's been very good at sort of, I've talked about that joint comms plan with NRW and the North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. So Graham's been keeping the communities informed and the local members informed about what he's doing and why he's doing it. Particularly in relation to the Llansillia Mountain restoration project, which we'll see in the next week or so, helicopters flying in Heather Brash and things like that. So in terms of the Llansillia restoration, this is a map showing the intensity of some of the what the fire caused on the mountain. So you can see the Horseshoe Pass road here, and this is the area of the mountain that was affected by the fire. The red areas are the areas that were the most intensively burnt, where really even after 2.5 years, very little is coming back. So we're targeting a restoration project in these areas. And that's based on a report that NRW commissioned just after the fire called the Penny Anderson report. And that's been the basis of our restoration work. And these are the areas that we'll be sort of concentrating on in the next week. We've already started some cutting work to sort of take heather, brash and seed from this area here to the west that was unaffected by the fire on the slopes of Molgair. So we've been taking heather, we've been cutting and bagging heather brash there, and we'll be then flying it across to the damaged parts of the moorland to lay onto the most damaged areas. And we'll be mixing that heather brash with grass seed as well. So the brown areas is where we will be putting seed down, and the green areas where we'll be putting brash across as well. So we've engaged a company from Lancashire who have specialist knowledge of this kind of work, and this is them at work last week up on Llansillia Mountain using specialist equipment to cut and bag heather brash on the mountain. Now this does two things. Obviously, it's really good for the moorland in where we're working. It reduces the fuel load on that part of the moorland. It's good for the habitat. But we can utilise the brash to help us to repair the damaged areas. This is what it looks like at the moment. It's waiting for the helicopter that's hopefully going to come next weekend, and then we'll be flying these bags in to the damaged areas. This is work that they were doing up in the Pennines, so it's work that they have good experience of. So we're hopeful if the weather's good next weekend, we'll be sort of completing this project. So that's Graham's project in a nutshell. Sorry, he would have done a much better job of explaining it than I have, but has anybody got any questions on that?
Please. Mike Scouse.
How do you stop the brash from being blown away?
Do you know what, that's one of the things we've talked about most. How do we stop the brash blowing away? Because it is an issue. It's very windy up there. So we've targeted some of the slopes for this method of restoration. We've targeted those slopes that are a little bit more sheltered. I think we anticipate that we will lose some, but it's more of a, it's quite finely cut, so it should form a bit of a mulch as well. So we're hopeful that it only needs to be there in order to give the grass seed underneath it a bit of a helping hand. So eventually.
Anybody else? No. Okay. No more questions for David. Okay. Thank you. Move on to item number 6 then, please. Oh, sorry. David Kelly.
Only very quickly, Chair, but slow to get the raised button hand up. All it was I've had flagged up to me recently from our local PCSOs that now we're starting to unlock, even on the 5-mile radius, the moor where the black grouse are on Ruab and Monera Moor, going over towards the Llandegla Mountain Bike Centre, has become a place where the the police refer to them as the boy racers. The cars from the town are going up on the mountain, they're congregating, whether there is issues with the illicit drugs and things like this, but they are actually congregating. That is a concern because some of the vehicles that they are actually running has got the potential to cause fire. You know, they don't run spark arresters on some of these cars. They're backfiring on the turbos and whatever. So it's just a bit of intelligence, really. The police are sort of monitoring it, but I just wondered, I can remember a lot of traditional signage where we used to see the beating stations where they used to say no fires, and we don't seem to have anything like that in these locations now. I know people tend to ignore the signage, but no signage is not very good from an educational point of view, just trying to refer people to the fact that they shouldn't be chucking cigarette butts out and things like this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, David?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that.
David, please. Your bandwidth is.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, it is part of Graham's role to promote those messages about danger of wildfires and no camping, no sort of barbecues, and he'll be picking that up as we go in more to the summer. We have spoken to the estate upon that part of the mountain about potentially improving some of the areas around where people are sort of fly parking up there to sort of reduce the impact of it. And we've put an application into the National Grid LEI programme to try and do some work there. But it is a concern. I know we had a transit van, I think, that was burnt out up there a couple of years ago, right on the side of the road in amongst the heather. So it is a real worry, that kind of activity and the impact that it might have for fire.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you very much. Okay, right. We'll move on to item number 6, which is the forward work programme. Howard, would you take us through that, please?
Thank you, Tony. The forward work programme, obviously this year's been quite tricky with the COVID and meetings, and we've moved to a different format in many occasions. Just to say on terms of funding, we're awaiting a funding letter from Natural Resources Wales. We've had a provisional confirmation that we're having some money for the next 3 years, but we haven't had it. Already mentioned the SDF funded 100k from Welsh Government, which is good news. AONB management plan will be reported on to the June committee, where we're hoping to bring you a draft. Volunteering has been very difficult. Social distancing, although there is a small amount of volunteering still going on in loggerheads and in other places. Tourism strategy I've mentioned. Joint committee carried on, but we also had a couple of chairs meetings where we brought the chairs from the joint committee, the partnership and the working group together, just to keep everyone updated to how we were progressing things throughout the AONB. The forum is currently suspended. We're looking to have one in September now, but we do have a date, the 29th of April, where we will meet with the local members and all the towns and community councils who have part of their area in the AONB. So we've actually got a specific date for that now. Looking on to the partnership again, we've had partnership meetings via Zoom and I think via Teams. WebEx was the hardest one of the lot we tried to do and seemed to be the most difficult for people, but we seem to be rested on those two formats now. AONB award went to Kilkin School and the art group that both Karen and David has publicised quite widely, and it's gone onto social media. We've now had a meeting of the landscape and character and built group, and we've also had a meeting of the heritage and culture working group. So we're now trying to get all of those groups meeting again. over the next few months. So that's good news, and we seem to have found the format in teams where they can work reasonably well together. But again, there are a few people who don't want to meet like this, which is fine, and we would like to get out to at least do field visits, you know, if that's applicable over the summertime. Moving on to funding, you can see the sorts of Welsh Government funding that's been pumped into the AONB through not just our AONB, the other 4 AONBs and the 3 national parks. But, you know, credit to David in particular, because he's always been keen to take on this money. Then we have to try and follow the Denbighshire procedures that the finance teams want to take us through to actually get this through the books. But, you know, it's quite often very tight. As David's rightly said, you know, all our targets by June, but you can see the sort of the extent of Morvamai, the lighting at loggerheads, climate change, going on and on, you know, through all those different things. Some have been revenue, some have been capital. Wenvrud, loggerheads, those projects David's just talked about as well. So, you know, a variety of projects. So moving on to, if we spent all that money, moving on to next year, we've got an allocation of 225,000 with Welsh Government, which we've put in a range of projects. We haven't had confirmation or whether they like the projects yet. It now has to go through a middle project team who are the protected landscape coordination really for Wales. There's 2 people there who are bringing all these projects together from us and the national parks. But what we also have is £425,000 to spend as the 8 protected landscapes to look at, you know, joint projects. We've looked at art, we've looked at sort of climate change resilience and biodiversity resilience. That fund is still up for sort of, you know, talking about. Then moving on to the other ones, obviously we've just had those reports. Within one of the revenue funds, we've got some money for climate change. So we're looking to appoint over the next few months a climate change and catchment officer. This is with extra funding from Denbighshire, from the catchment plans and via Wayne Hope, our flood risk manager. So that will be working with him in the AONB, but also, you know, in the catchments of the D and the Clwyd. Then we've got the MRAMP, which has sort of stalled a little bit. I'm moving on to the final page. Scottish Power are still looking at undergrounding. We've recently had a meeting about looking at some more sites. One of the sites being the Penguin Vale above Llangollen, and we're, you know, consistently introducing new sites for especially 11 kV undergrounding. David's mentioned National Grid. We've got, you know, schemes awaiting approval, and there's 2 live schemes as well. And I think that's great news. I think David Kelly, Councillor Kelly, will have appreciate, you know, work being done out on the mall and there, you know, to look at the car parking and stuff, which is great that the money can be used on that. I've seen some fabulous dry stone walling, but I think also in that area, you know, supporting traditional farming as they've talked about in various presentations this morning, in terms of the hefted flocks we've still got up there, and trying to keep these traditional methods of farming going, which are so important. We've got some meetings going on with Future Landscapes, but this is now moved into the National Association leading those on a bi-monthly meeting. Well, 1 month, yeah, 2 meetings, one for the full team and one for the lead officers. That's what we have each month now. The aqueduct, the sewage works down below, we've made some progress on that. The Durham, we have produced an appraisal document. We've put in a small amount of money to try and open the gateway to doing some landscaping underneath the aqueduct to the sewage works. There's parts of it that are redundant, and we can do some landscaping there. Severn Trent, no real progress on that. They have put a new reservoir in Llangollen as well. They're supposed to be doing some planting on that, so that's something to follow up on that one. And highways guidance for local authorities. This is an area that came about through the amount of yellow grip bins we saw just plonked in the countryside throughout Denbighshire with no sort of attention to detail, and whether in the AONB or out the AONB. And basically we felt that, you know, those could have been different colours, they could have been different actions, they could have consulted us, and they did none of that. But the good news is that that's led me to sort of think that maybe this is an area where, you know, highways departments, all three authorities, can just do things. And we saw it around the World Heritage Site and the Basin, where they've got really thick double yellow lines everywhere, which could have been much more empathetic to the World Heritage Site. We see signage clutter. So we're looking at that, and we will produce some guidance. We've got some volunteers from the partnership as well to have a look at that. And also, it also led me to talk with Steve here today, Steve Price, our sort of lead officer in terms of the joint committee and all the committees across the authority. And I've sort of suggested, what can we do to get to those other departments that we don't necessarily have a relationship with? And often on all committee reports you see, have you consulted IT, have you consulted highways, have you consulted this? And I've asked Steve whether we can look at a short piece on the AONB. Is this in the AONB? And should you have some thought to do that under section 85, which is the duty of regard to the AONB that all public bodies have? So Steve and me are sort of looking at that, and obviously for Carolyn and Derek and Hugh and David, you know, if we do it in Denbighshire, it's something that I'd like to roll out across the three authorities, that it's almost having a regard for the purposes of AONB designation in a very short way on every sort of committee report. Have you taken account of it? And then obviously they can say yes or no. So that's a quick rundown of what we've got planned. Don't know whether we've got any questions about any of that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Howard. I did raise that the bid matter with Tony Ward, our officer, and he didn't give it any thought, so they do apologise over that, but your point is extremely valid and well made. Bobby Feely, you had a question, please?
Yeah. I just was wondering, and it's purely listening to Howard's presentation that it's come to my mind. But in Denbighshire Leisure, the arts section, we've got a project called Lost in Art, which is for people living with dementia. Obviously, at the moment, everything has to be done, you know, virtually and so on. But I know they do very much miss the one-to-one side of things. Alongside of that, Denbighshire have received accreditation from the Alzheimer's Society for working towards a dementia-friendly Denbighshire County Council, which does involve all the services. And as you say, Howard, it is quite difficult sometimes to reach everyone and make them understand what project you're doing. But I just wondered if I heard you mention something to do with art. I can't remember, but you did say something about an art project. I wondered if there was any scope at all in linking up with the project leader on this in Denbighshire Leisure, is Sian Fitzgerald. And I just wondered, is it worth some sort of link up to this project? The Lost in Arts project is funded partially by arts, what's it called? The Arts Council for Wales. But, you know, I just wondered if it was worth looking at all. What do you think?
Absolutely. I know Lost in Art, I know the project, and I know one of the people delivering that project. So with my mother-in-law going into a home last week with dementia, you know, it's very pertinent to our family about, you know, ways to sort of extend people's stay outside, you know, having to go into a home. So, you know, Lost in Art is a fabulous project, and, you know, I've had some details about what's actually happening in that. Just to say, I know that David talks to Sian on a regular basis, so we would be sort of trying to help there. but we've also got 2 other projects. There's also, I don't know if you remember me reading out the poem about 18 months ago, The Fugitive. That's developed into a National Association of AOMBs project. So that's all AOMBs, and England and Wales are involved in it. And we've also got an all Wales AOMB project potential that's been introduced by some artists as well. So I think art is in every corner, Bobby, and you know, if we can get there and help in any shape or form, you know, whether that's providing the outdoor opportunities or whether we can get involved in it directly, it's something that, you know, is really important, especially for any of us that have actually dealt with, you know, family dementia. You know, it is a horrible thing, and whatever we can do to support people with dementia, especially if they are sort of not in a home yet, you know, the longer we can keep them at home, the better. So yes, fully support it, Bobby.
Thanks very much, Howard. Keep me up to date on any progress in that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, will do.
Councillor Kelly, did you have a question?
Yeah, there was just a couple of observations, Chair. The forward work programme that we've just alluded to, there's a couple of dates within there. I think the strategic plans are dated 1720. I think that needs to be moved on to the relatively new date. And some of these dates, when we say suspended till March 21, well, we are at that point. So I think we need some review dates including within the document now to see when we may see some of this happening as we start to unlock. And the other thing I'd like to just reference is the fact that a lot of the stuff that we've seen today from the officers, very good presentations, but something we discuss in Wrexham quite frequently is whether these presentations could go out prior to the meeting so that we've got time to look at them, because I don't think during the time we've got for the meeting, we can do justice to some of these presentations. I think I would have raised other questions if I'd have seen the presentations prior to today. So that's just, I don't know if it's possible for officers to have this, you know, we see them perhaps a week in advance, if they could go out, you know, in the old sort of PowerPoint type of presentation, PDFs or whatever, because there's a tremendous amount of detail and information here that, you know, we could actually be looking at and sorting quite a bit of this outside the meeting instead of just trying to condense it into the 2 hours that we've got. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, very good point, David. Yeah, we'll take that on board and we'll do that in future.
Yeah, David, I think that's absolutely really, you know, obviously my points where I've not updated the dates. Yes, we'll take that on board, but also, you know, if we will try and get the PowerPoints out when the agendas and everything else is sent out by Steve's central team, that's, you know, I suppose it's remiss of us not to really be doing that on a regular basis. You know, if we've got those dates set in stone, so when we know they're always 2 weeks before, there's no reason why we shouldn't do it. And we will send out those PowerPoints that you've seen today to everyone as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Howard. Okay, the last item then, future meeting dates for the full committee. Have we got those, Howard?
I normally go to Karen on that, but they are all in it.
They're all in there, aren't they? Yeah. I've seen them in the diary. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're normally at the bottom of the minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll take that as read then. Yeah, it's not a problem. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for attending this morning. I wish you all a safe journey from your lounges or your conservatories to your kitchen. From the 4 of us here in Ruthin, we'd like to wish you all a very good weekend. So,
thank you very much.
See you again.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.